Hare Krishna, my dear devotees. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books, right here in the live studios in Hythe, Kent, Southeast England, just a stone's throw from the English Channel. I've been talking since 1 o'clock this afternoon, and it's now almost 7:30. So you'll forgive me if my voice isn't quite up to the task, but I've been told by my referee, he's everything to me. He's also my referee, Abhay Das Brahmachari. He told me that my voice sounds fine. So here I am. Praying that you are all safe and happy and well and yes. Whatever's happening in life, when we sit down to read this Bhagavatam and other Srila Prabhupada's books at this time every night, my life becomes perfected. So whatever else is going on, whatever difficulties there are, problem solving to do, suffering that we have to watch and we have no control over, when we're together like this reading Srila Prabhupada's magical books. I heard Gopi Purāṇa Prabhu say today that what would just imagine what would have happened if all these other books didn't come out and we only had Prabhupada's books. He said a lot of the quarreling would be over and we would have enough to go back to Godhead. So I am rededicating myself to this process of hearing Srila Prabhupada's books to increase my attachment to him and to all the devotees. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Mahima Stotram by Srila Sanatana Goswami, glorifying the Bhagavatam for what it is. Goes like this. Sarva Shastrabdipi Yusha, Sarva Vedaika Satpala, Sarva Siddhanta Ratnaja, Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Purāṇa, Śrīmad-Bhāgavata Prabho, Kali Dvandoditaditya, Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, you are the sun, risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya, Prema Varshakshadayate, Sarvada Sarvasevyaya, Sri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin, Madguru Man Mahadana, Man Nistadaga Mad Bhagya, Mad Anandanamostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu sadhuta dayin adini chochata kada hanamun chagadachin mam premna rit kantayokspudha. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Well, we reached the 10th chapter of the second canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. And Shukadeva Goswami is continuing to go deeper into the explanation of the creation of the universe in answer to the most wonderful questions, deep, many in detail, and questions, comprehensive. We're beginning with text 47, and there's only 51 verses in this chapter. So we may finish, we will finish the second canto today, and maybe we'll start the third canto, we'll see. Depends on how many purports there are. Text 47. O King, I shall in due course explain the measurement of time in its gross and subtle features with the specific symptoms of each. But for the present, let me explain unto you the Padma Kalpa. Purport. The present duration of a kalpa of Brahma is called the Varaha Kalpa, or Shweta Varaha Kalpa, because the incarnation of the Lord as Varaha took place during the creation of Brahma, who was born on the lotus coming out of the abdomen of Vishnu. Therefore, this Varaha Kalpa is also called Padma Kalpa, and this is testified by acharyas like Jiva Goswami, as well as Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in pursuance of the first commentator, Swami Sridhar. So there is no contradiction between the Varaha and the Padma Kalpa of Brahma. Text 48. Shaunaka Rishi, after hearing about all the creation, inquired from Sutta Goswami about Vidura, for Sutta Goswami had previously informed him how Vidura left home, leaving aside all his relatives who were very difficult to leave. Purport. The rishis headed by Shaunaka were more anxious to know about Vidura, who met Maitreya Rishi while traveling to the pilgrimage sites of the world. Text 49 and 50. Shaunaka Rishi said, "Let us know, please, what topics were discussed between Vidura and Maitreya, who talked on transcendental subjects, and what was inquired by Vidura and replied by Maitreya. Also, please let us know the reason for Vidura's giving up the connection of his family members and why he again went home. Please also let us know the activities of Vidura while he was in the places of pilgrimage." Purport. Sri Sutta Goswami was narrating the topics of the creation and destruction of the material world, but it appears that the rishis, headed by Shaunaka, were more inclined to hear of transcendental subjects, which are on a higher level than the physical. There are two classes of men, namely those too addicted to the gross body and the material world, and others, on the higher level, who are interested more in transcendental knowledge. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam gives facility to everyone, both to the materialist and to the transcendentalist. By hearing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam in the matter of the Lord's glorious activities, both in the material world and in the transcendental world, men can derive equal benefit. The materialists are more interested in the physical laws and how they are acting, and they see wonders in those physical glamours. Sometimes due to physical glamours, they forget the glories of the Lord. They should know definitely that physical activities and their wonders are all initiated by the Lord. The rose in the garden actually takes its shape and color to become beautiful and sweet. Notice the roses on our altar. The rose in the garden gradually takes its shape and color to become beautiful and sweet, not by a blind physical law, although it appears like that. Behind that physical law is the direction of the complete consciousness of the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, things cannot take shape so systematically. The artist draws a picture of a rose very nicely, with all attention and artistic sense, and yet it does not become as perfect as the real rose. If that is the real fact, how can we say that the real rose has taken its shape without intelligence behind the beauty? This sort of conclusion is due to a poor fund of knowledge. One must know that from the above description of creation and annihilation, that the Supreme Consciousness, being omnipresent, can take care of everything with perfect attention. That is the fact of the omnipresence of the Supreme Lord. Persons still more foolish than the gross materialists, however, claim to be transcendentalists and claim to have such supreme, all-pervading consciousness. But offer no proof. Such foolish persons cannot know what is going on behind the next wall, yet they are falsely proud of possessing the cosmic, all-pervading consciousness of the Supreme Person. For them, also, hearing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, hearing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is a great help. It will open their eyes to see that simply by claiming supreme consciousness, one does not become supremely conscious. One has to prove in the physical world that he has such supreme consciousness. The rishis of Naimisharanya, however, were above the gross materialists and the false transcendentalists, and thus they were always anxious to know the real truth in transcendental matters, as discussed by authorities. Text 51. Sutta Goswami, Sri Sutta Goswami explained, I shall now explain to you the very subjects explained by the great sage in answer to King Parikshit's inquiries. Please hear them attentively. Purport. Any question that is put forward that may be answered by quoting the authority, and that satisfies the saner section. That is the system, even in the law court. The best lawyer gives evidence from the past judgment of the court without taking much trouble to establish his case. This is called the parampara system, and learned authorities follow it without manufacturing rubbish interpretations. Ishvara Paramak Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karanam. Let us all obey the Supreme Lord, whose hand is in everything without exception. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the second canto, 10th chapter of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, entitled Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. End of the second canto. All glories to the second canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. The first canto was the prelude, And now we in the instructions of Shukadeva Goswami to Maharaj Parikshit, and he answers all the right questions, and Shukadeva Goswami is telling the right answers and citing other great authorities and their answers in the Parampara system. Hare Krishna. Okay, here we go. Third canto, the status quo. Chapter 1, Questions by Vidura. Text 1. Shukadeva Goswami said, O king, after Vidura, the great devotee, renounced his prosperous home and entered the forest, he asked these very questions of his grace, Maitreya Rishi. 2. Text 2. What else is there to say about the residential house of the Pandavas? Sri Krishna, the Lord of everything, acted as your minister. He used to enter that house as if it were his own, and he did not care at all for Duryodhana's house. Purport. According to the Gaudiya Achintya Beda Tattva philosophy, anything which satisfies the senses of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna is also Sri Krishna. For example, Sri Vrindavan Dham is non-different from Sri Krishna, Tad Dhamma Vrindavanam. Because at Vrindavan, the Lord enjoys the transcendental bliss of his internal potency. Similarly, the house of the Pandavas was also a source of transcendental bliss for the Lord. It is mentioned here that the Lord identified the house with his own self. Thus, the house of the Pandavas was as good as Vrindavan, and Vidura should not have given up that place of transcendental bliss. Therefore, the reason for his quitting the house was not exactly a family misunderstanding. Rather, Vidura took the opportunity to meet Rishi Maitreya and discuss transcendental knowledge. For a saintly person like Vidura, any disturbance due to worldly affairs is insignificant. Such disturbances, however, are sometimes favorable for higher realization, and therefore Vidura took advantage of a family misunderstanding in order to meet Maitreya Rishi. Text 3. The king asked Shukadeva Goswami, where and when did the meeting and discussion take place between Saint Vidura and His Grace Maitreya Muni? Kindly oblige, my Lord, and describe this to us. Purport. Exactly as Shonaka Rishi inquired of Sutta Goswami, and Sutta Goswami replied, so Srila Shukadeva Goswami replied to King Parikshit's inquiries. The king was very anxious to understand the meaningful discussion that took place between the two great souls. Text 4. Saint Vidura was a great and pure devotee of the Lord, and therefore his questions to His Grace Rishi Maitreya must have been very purposeful, on the highest level, and approved by learned circles. Purport. Questions and answers among different classes of men have different value. Inquiries by mercantile men in a business exchange cannot be expected to be highly purposeful in spiritual values. Questions and answers by different classes of men can be guessed by the caliber of the persons concerned. In the Bhagavad Gita, the discussion was between Lord Sri Krishna and Arjuna, the Supreme Person and the Supreme Devotee, respectively. The Lord admitted Arjuna to be his devotee and friend, and therefore any sane man can guess that the discussion was on the topic of the Bhakti Yoga system. Actually, the whole Bhagavad Gita is based on the principle of Bhakti Yoga. There is a difference between karma and karma yoga. Karma is regulated action for the enjoyment of the fruit by the performer, but karma yoga is action performed by the devotee for the satisfaction of the Lord. Karma yoga is based on bhakti, or pleasing the Lord, whereas karma is based on pleasing the senses of the performer himself. According to Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, one is advised to approach a bona fide spiritual master when one is actually inclined to question from an elevated level of spiritual understanding. A common man who has no interest in spiritual values has no need to approach a spiritual master, just as a matter of following fashion. As a student, Maharaj Parikshit was serious about learning the science of God, and Shukadeva Goswami was a bona fide spiritual master in the transcendental science. Both of them knew that the topics discussed by Vidura and Rishi Maitreya were elevated, and thus Maharaj Parikshit was very interested in learning about them from his bona fide spiritual master. Text 5. Sri Sutta Goswami said, "The great sage Shukadeva Goswami was highly experienced, and being pleased with the king, thus being questioned by the king, he said to him, 'Please hear the topics attentively.'" Text 6. Sri Shukadeva Goswami said, "King Dhritarashtra became blind under the influence of impious desires to nourish his dishonest sons, and thus he set fire to the Lak house to burn his fatherless nephews, the Pandavas." Purport. Dhritarashtra was blind from birth, but his blindness in committing impious activities to support his dishonest sons was a greater blindness than his physical lack of eyesight. The physical lack of sight does not bar one from spiritual progress, but when one is blind spiritually, even though physically fit, that blindness is dangerously detrimental to the progressive path of human life. Text 7. The king did not forbid his son Dushasana's abominable action of grabbing the hair of Draupadi, the wife of the godly king, Yudhishthir, even though her tears washed the red dust on her breasts. Text 8. Yudhishthir, whose enemy was never born, was unfairly defeated in gambling. But because he had taken the vow of truthfulness, he went off to the forest. When he came back in due course and begged the return of his rightful share of the kingdom, he was refused by Dhritarashtra, who was overwhelmed by illusion. Purport. Maharaj Yudhishthir was the rightful heir to his father's kingdom, but just to favor his own sons, headed by Duryodhana, Dhritarashtra, Maharaj Yudhishthir's uncle, adopted various unfair means to cheat his nephews of their rightful share of the kingdom. At last, the Pandavas demanded only 5 villages, one for each of the 5 brothers. But that was also refused by the usurpers. This incident led to the war of Kurukshetra. The battle of Kurukshetra therefore was induced by the Kurus and not the Pandavas. Because the Pandavas were Kshatriyas, their only proper livelihood was to rule and not to accept any other occupation. A Brahmana, Kshatriya, or Vaishya will not accept employment for his livelihood under any circumstances. Text 9. Lord Krishna was sent by Arjuna into the assembly as the spiritual master of the whole world. And although his words were heard by some, like Bhishma, as pure nectar, it was not so for the others, who were completely bereft of the last farthing of past pious works. The king, Dhritarashtra or Duryodhana, did not take the words of Lord Krishna very seriously. Purport. Lord Krishna, who is the spiritual master of the entire universe, accepted the duty of a messenger and, deputed by Arjuna, went to the assembly of King Dhritarashtra on a peace mission. Krishna is everyone's Lord, yet because he was the transcendental friend of Arjuna, he gladly accepted the role. He gladly accepted the role of messenger, exactly like an ordinary friend. That is the beauty of the Lord's behavior with his pure devotees. He reached the assembly and spoke about peace, and the message was relished by Bhishma and other great leaders because it was spoken by the Lord himself. But neither Duryodhana nor his father, Dhritarashtra, took the message very seriously due to the exhaustion of the pious results of their past deeds. That is the way of persons who have no credit of pious deeds. By pious deeds, one may become the king of a country, but because the results of the pious acts of Duryodhana and company were dwindling, it became evident from their actions that they were sure to lose the kingdom to the Pandavas. The message of Godhead is always like nectar to the devotees, but it is just the opposite to the non-devotees. Sugar candy is always sweet to a healthy man, but it tastes very bitter to persons suffering from jaundice. Text 10. When Vidura was invited by his elder brother, Dhritarashtra, for consultation, he entered the house and gave instructions which were exactly to the point. His advice is well known, and instructions by Vidura are approved by expert ministers of state. Purport. Political suggestions by Vidura are known as expert, just as, in modern times, Pandit Chanakya is considered the authority and good counsel in both political and moral instructions. Text 11. Vidura said, "You must now return the legitimate share to Yudhishthir, who has no enemies and who has been forbearing through untold sufferings due to your offenses. He is waiting with his younger brothers, among whom is the revengeful Bhima, breathing heavily like a snake. Surely you are afraid of him." Text 12. Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead, has accepted the sons of Pritha as his kinsmen, and all the kings of the world are with Lord Krishna. He is present in his home with all his family members, the kings and princes of the Yadu dynasty, who have conquered an unlimited number of rulers, and he, is their lord. Purport. Vidura gave Dhritarashtra very good counsel regarding political alliance with the sons of Pritha, the Pandavas. The first thing he said was that Lord Krishna was intimately related with them as their cousin. Because Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is worshipable by all Brahmanas and demigods who are the controllers of the universal affairs. Besides that, Lord Krishna and his family members, the royal order of the Yadu dynasty, were the conquerors of all the kings of the world. The Kshatriyas used to fight the kings of various dominions and kidnap their beautiful princess daughters after conquering their relatives. This system was laudable because the Kshatriyas and the princesses would be married only on the basis of the chivalry of the conquering Kshatriya. All the young princes of the Yadu dynasty married the daughters of other kings in this way, by chivalrous force, and thus they were conquerors of all the kings of the world. Vidura wanted to impress upon his elder brother that fighting with the Pandavas was fraught with many dangers, because they were supported by Lord Krishna, who had conquered even in his childhood demons like Kamsa and Jarasandha, and demigods like Brahma and Indra. Therefore, all universal power was behind the Pandavas. Text 13. You are maintaining offense personified, Duryodhana, as your infallible son, but he is envious of Lord Krishna. And because you are thus maintaining a non-devotee of Krishna, you are devoid of all auspicious qualities. Relieve yourself of this ill fortune as soon as possible and do good to the whole family. Purport. A good son is called apatya, one who does not allow his father to fall down. The son can protect the father's soul when the father is dead by offering sacrifices to please the Supreme Lord Vishnu. This system is still prevalent in India. After the death of his father, a son goes to offer sacrifices at the lotus feet of Vishnu at Gaya, and thus delivers the father's son if the father is fallen. But if the son is already an enemy of Vishnu, how in such an inimical mood can he offer sacrifice unto Lord Vishnu's lotus feet? Lord Krishna is directly the personality of Godhead, Vishnu, and Duryodhana was inimical to him. He would therefore be unable to protect his father, Dhritarashtra, after his death. He himself was to fall down because of his faithlessness towards Vishnu. How then could he protect his father? Vidura advised Dhritarashtra to get rid of such an unworthy son as Duryodhana as soon as possible, if he was at all anxious to see to the good of his family. According to the moral instructions of Chanakya Pandit, what is the use of a son who is neither a learned man nor a devotee of the Lord? If a son is not a devotee of the Supreme Lord, he is just like blind eyes, a source of trouble. A physician may sometimes advise the extrication of such useless eyes from their sockets, so that one can be relieved of the constant trouble. Duryodhana was exactly like blind, troubling eyes. He would be a source of great trouble to the family of Dhritarashtra, as foreseen by Vidura. Vidura therefore rightly advised his eldest brother to get rid of this source of trouble. Dhritarashtra was wrongly maintaining such personified offense under the mistaken impression that Duryodhana was a good son. Duryodhana was a good son, able to liberate his father. Text 14. While speaking thus, Vidura, whose personal character was esteemed by respectable persons, was insulted by Duryodhana, who was swollen with anger and whose lips were trembling. Duryodhana was in the company of Karna, his younger brothers, and his maternal uncle Shakuni. Purport. It is said that giving good counsel to a foolish person causes the fool to become angry, just as feeding milk to a snake only increases its venomous poison. Saint Vidura was so honorable that his character was looked up to by all respectable persons. But Duryodhana was so foolish that he dared to insult Vidura. This was due to his bad association with Shakuni, his maternal uncle, as well as with his friend Karna, who always encouraged Duryodhana in his nefarious acts. Text 15. Who asked him to come here, this son of a kept mistress? He is so crooked that he spies in the interest of the enemy against those on whose support he has grown up. Toss him out of the palace immediately and leave him only with his breath. Purport. When getting married, the Kshatriya kings would take several other youthful girls along with the married princess. These girl attendants of the king were known as dasis, or attendant mistresses. By intimate association with the king, the dasis would get sons. Such sons were called dasi putras. They had no claim to a royal position, but they would get maintenance and other facilities just like princes. Vidura was the son of such a dasi, and he was not counted amongst the Kshatriyas. King Dhritarashtra was very affectionate toward his younger dasi putra brother Vidura, and Vidura was a great friend and philosophical advisor to Dhritarashtra. Duryodhana knew very well that Vidura was a great soul and well-wisher, but unfortunately he used strong words to hurt his innocent uncle. Duryodhana not only attacked Vidura's birth, but also called him an infidel because he seemed to support the case of Yudhishthir, whom Duryodhana considered his enemy. He desired that Vidura be immediately put out of the palace and deprived of all his possessions. If possible, he would have liked him caned until he was left with nothing but his breath. He charged that Vidura was a spy of the Pandavas because he advised King Dhritarashtra in their favor. Such is the situation of palace life and the intricacies of diplomacy that even a faultless person like Vidura could be charged with something abominable and punished. Vidura was struck with wonder at such unexpected behavior from his nephew, Duryodhana, and before anything actually happened, he decided to leave the palace for good. Hare Krishna. That brings us to 8 o'clock. So we'll stop here our reading, having auspiciously begun the 3rd canto, and I believe it is on Akshara Tirtha. No? My phone. Oh, the phone's over there. Can't see. Anyway, I think it's Akshara Tirtha. It was either yesterday or today. Hare Krishna. So we'll begin our reading tomorrow at text 16, and we'll pray to the great sages, or present, to vocalize their reflections, so that we can all examine them in ecstasy. Hare Krishna.
Okay, first is from Gopakanya Devi Dasi.
Gopakanya Devi Dasi. Hare Krishna.
Jai Maharaj, Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
All glories to His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada.
And from Bhakta Rupa.
Hey Bhakta Rupa, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Bhakta Ali distributed another Bhagavatam set today on the street in Cardiff.
Wow. Now that's auspicious. I used to go out in the parking lots around San Francisco in 1973, and I had one of those little Volkswagen Beetles, and at that time we had just received the first 6 volumes of the Bhagavatam. The first one was already out, so there was Canto 1, 2, and 3. That was 5. And the first volume of Canto 3, that was 6. And I used to, in the back seat, I used to put all 6 books, like in a row. And then I would go out and look for somebody who would be interested. And I would kind of hype them a little bit, like, I want to show you something, most beautiful thing you've ever seen. And they would come to the car and I'd open the door, and then they'd see the Bhagavatams. And sometimes they'd take a set. So that was 1973. So I'm so happy when I hear that someone's giving a full set of Bhagavatams, 18 volumes on the street. That is high preaching. So congratulations to Ali. Hare Krishna. Prabhupada is very, very happy with him, for sure.
And from Rati Manjari.
Yes, Rati, Haribol.
She says, Jai Guru Maharaj, everything around me always changes, but your daily readings are the steady anchor in my life.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone needs encouragement, and you give me a lot. Thank you so much.
And from Bhakta Christopher.
Yes, Bhakta Christopher.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.
Sudevi Dasi says, Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes, Sudevi Dasi, my god sister. Thank you so much. Haribol.
Rati Manjari says, Jai Bhakta Ali, and then a hashtag Ali rocks.
Nice.
And from Jagamohan.
Yes, Jagamohan.
Hare Krishna, dear Maharaj and dear devotees, please accept my respectful obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. As we finish the 2nd canto and begin the 3rd, I am reminded of a personal realization. Hearing the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is a lot like eating Mahaprasadam, whichever part is currently being consumed instantly becomes the very best part. On that note, thank you for your continued service in finishing the very best canto and beginning the very best canto. All glories to the daily readings, all glories to the Srimad-Bhagavatam.
Yes, it's like that. More perfect, and the most perfect. It just keeps getting better and better and never stops. Thank you.
Rati Manjari commented, today, yes, Akshaya Tritiya.
Yes, that's what I thought. Very auspicious day.
And from Subbarao Rajagopal.
Yes, Subbarao Rajagopal.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances and all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for your daily reading service, Maharaj. In the purport 2.10.49, quote, the rose in the garden gradually takes its shape and color to become beautiful and sweet, not by blind physical law, although it appears like that. Behind that physical law is the direction of the complete consciousness of the Supreme Lord. Otherwise things cannot take shape so systematically. This is one of the highlights. Srila Prabhupada ends the canto by Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha Anadi Adi Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. Brahma Samhita 5.1. Let us all obey the Supreme Lord, whose hand is in everything, without exception.
There you go. There you go.
And from Gauranga Gopal.
Yes, Gauranga Gopal.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Prabhupada.
It is interesting how Dhritarashtra is described here as being consciously committing impious activities against the Pandavas, when it seems that he usually is described as a victim to his son's own impiety. Is that the case, that he just didn't disagree to his son's whims, or did he also more consciously partake in the sinful activities?
Both. He was both influenced by his attachment to his son, and that influence changed him, and he felt the same. And he admitted that Krishna was right. But he couldn't hear because of his attachment for his sons. So this is the effect of attachment, family attachment. If you become too attached to a member of your family that is evil, then you become evil also, or you share in that evilty. Therefore, it's so important, the persons that we associate with. If we stay with the devotees and associate with the devotees, then we are safe. Prabhupada said that is the only protection against Maya in this Kali Yuga, the association of the devotees. So we should organize our lives in such a way that we're always in the company of devotees. And we are safe. Hare Krishna.
And from Bhakta Oliver.
Yes, Bhakta Oliver.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for these daily readings. So fortunate to be able to hear every day. To hear every day, here with all the assembled devotees.
Supreme good fortune. True.
Also, thank you for the encouragement. One thing that stood out for me was, quote, the message of Godhead is always like nectar to the devotees, but it is just the opposite to the non-devotees.
Yes.
Sugar candy is always sweet to a healthy man, but it tastes very bitter to persons suffering from jaundice.
Exactly. Therefore, you can't get a taste for hearing the Bhagavatam unless you're a devotee. So it's safe it's safe in general to be with devotees, but to be with devotees who are attached to hearing about Krishna and being together with them, that is most auspicious, most fortunate. That's how we get a taste.
More from Gauranga Gopal.
You notice that even though Duryodhana insulted Vidura for giving his father the right advice, Vidura left before he could do something like cane him or punish him or whatever. And it's described by our acharyas that he left his, bow and arrow and sword and whatever else he had on the doorstep as he was leaving, to symbolically, leave the royal palace and go into the forest in search of higher association. So it's interesting because he came back later on and really gave Dhritarashtra the sauce. That was after all of his sons were killed in the battle of Kurukshetra, and he was still living in the palace of Yudhishthira, being maintained by him, even though this was the culture. Imagine how elevated the culture is. Yudhishthira was so good that he treated his, Dhritarashtra like a king. He treated him in such a way that he was more or less unchanged. That was his goodness. Therefore it says in the 12th canto, 12th chapter of the Gita, that the devotee never becomes the enemy of his devotee, of his enemy. That's a true devotee, who never becomes the enemy of the enemy.
More from Gauranga Gopal.
Yes, Gauranga Gopal.
Also, I heard that Shakuni had a lot of grief against the Kurus, and played the role of exhausting Duryodhana's pious critics quicker to precipitate the battle of Kurukshetra. He sounds like a proper agent of chaos. Do you know how did Shakuni get this grief against them?
Honestly, I don't remember the details, but it certainly is true what you just said. It already said the detail wasn't there, but the fact that it was under the influence of Shakuni that this happened. It was Shakuni who put up, Dushasana and Duryodhana to try to, undress Draupadi in front of the whole assembly. It was Shakuni who did that. It was Shakuni also who rigged the gambling match, who cheated in the gambling match. And Yudhishthira, who was an honest Kshatriya, and never told a lie in his life, he just went into the forest. Reminds you of Ramachandra, who was followed the order of his father, even though it was wrong morally, but he followed it, and that's a higher morality. These are such moral people and so spiritually elevated people, even the whole culture, that they lived by codes of ethics that is now, it's like a mythology. People think it's a mythology because they look around them and see how corrupt all the politicians are. They can't agree with one another about anything, They can only find the fault in one another. They can't see the good. They can't even see that the other party is also, a loyal, citizen or servant of the state. All they can do is find their faults. Hare Krishna.
And one more thing from Gauranga.
Therefore, Srila Prabhupada always instructed us to cooperate together. Strength in numbers. The example is given in the Vedas. You have a group, some sticks, and individually each stick can be broken very easily, but if you tie a bunch of them together, they become strong like steel. unbreakable. So let us pray that all of us in this ISKCON movement and the BBT can, revive the cooperative spirit and not be influenced by dissension and quarrel and disagreement. Hare Krishna.
Another question from Gauranga Gopal.
Yes, Gauranga Gopal.
Also, I may have misheard, but I think I heard that Dhritarashtra was an eternal associate of Krishna. Is that right, or am I just madly speculating?
It doesn't say that he's an eternal associate of Krishna, but it's a fact that no one can participate in Krishna's pastime like that and be an ordinary person. And the proof of him being not an ordinary person is that when he finally heard from Vidura, he also left and went to the forest and attained not pure love of God, but attained a mystic yoga perfection. We don't know the exact destination. It doesn't state. Hare Krishna.
And from Rati Manjari.
Yes, Rati.
Dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. At the end of this afternoon, I was a little touched to hear that the elderly mother of one of my devotee friends left her body on Akshaya Tritiya.
Oh, auspicious.
While her son was chanting Hare Krishna, loud and clear in her ear.
Very nice.
How wonderfully auspicious.
Wonderful.
My friend called me to ask if he could come and offer me a donation for the benefit of his mother. I reluctantly agreed because I know that I am not much of a Brahmana, but I did not want to refuse his gesture.
No, you shouldn't. You have to. You're a devotee.
He came and offered me an umbrella, slippers, water, and Lakshmi.
Nice.
After he left, I offered the items to you on my altar, since you are a powerful Brahmana in my experience. I distributed the Lakshmi by donating online to various devotional charities which I regularly donate to.
Nice. Thank you so much.
All in the name of the devotee's mother.
Yes, very nice.
Guru Maharaj, I am not familiar with such occurrences and I did not exactly know what to do. But I thought because it is an auspicious day, let me donate immediately. Have I acted correctly?
Yes, you're a Brahmani. That's what a Brahmani does. They give, they receive, and then they give. It's exactly right. What you did was exactly right. Hare Krishna. Congratulations.
She also has one more question.
Yes.
I was intending to use the articles later, for example the slippers, but I remembered afterwards that one should not use slippers which are offered to the spiritual master for oneself, and perhaps also the umbrella not. I am sorry if this is embarrassing to you, but could you please advise me about this?
What to do? Okay, if you accept me as on that level, I order you to use those articles. Therefore, dilemma is solved. Thank you very much, everyone, for those lovely reflections and wonderful conversation, all spiritual and uplifting. And Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai. It's done it again. Samabeda Bhakta-vinda ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. And now, tomorrow, same time, same place, same topic, we hear a little diversion from the description of the creation of the universe. And we're going to hear very nectarian topics about the discussions between Vidura and Uddhava and Maitreya. And it's going to be wonderful. See you tomorrow. Hare Krishna.